I called together this particular finance meeting just for one topic, and that's to talk about the police firing range contract. And I don't know, I know TJ, you sent an email earlier saying that Theo was gonna talk about something. Did we wanna start there, or did you want us to just start with questions?
I mean, doesn't make a difference to me either way, Counselor. I did send a memo out just explaining the 4 options we looked at as we try to make the decision what made the best sense for the city. I can go through that, or you can read it at your leisure. But I'll just give you the 4. Status quo, which is firing at Pearl Street, which they're currently doing, which I'll have the officers get into that. Purchasing memberships through Munson, that was unfeasible due to it's only 6 months, or it's not operational in the winter time. Construct a new standalone facility through debt. That would take 3 to 5 years, and Pete Garvey's here to talk about that. And I have Pat Sullivan here to talk about the police head.
Wait.
Yeah, we lost him a little bit. I think he's have to come towards.
Hey, TJ, I muted City Hall by mistake because I muted all. I didn't realize it was going to mute you. So sorry about that.
So you heard nothing.
Okay. We're good.
We're going to go through. We looked at 4 options as we were looking at this, and I will let Officer Dumas talk about one, because he is the person that's been front and center through all of this. But the first option was status quo, where we stay firing in the basement of Pearl Street. Pat Sullivan and the deputy and Mike are here to talk about why that's not a feasible option. Option 2 is purchasing memberships at another Munson firing range. That is outdoors and only open in the nice weather. So that was not an option. And then we had to pay for officers to get to and from. Construct a new standalone facility, which would cost 20 to 25 million and take 3 to 5 years to build. Pete Garvey's here to talk about that if necessary. And then how we came in to do the unique property acquisition through the Smith & Wesson, because they were the only firing range in the city of Springfield. That's kind of the overview. If you'd indulge me, I'd like Officer Dumas to talk about kind of the process and where his role has been, just so he's been at it for, I don't know, a couple of years now, probably.
Sure.
So.
Okay, my name is Officer Michael Dumas with the Springfield Police Academy, and in May of 2018, we were told by the West Springfield Police Department that we no longer had use of the range up in West Springfield that we had used for over 20 years. There was major noise complaints to the area down below where we were shooting. There was no fault of ours. What had happened is that because it was the only area for law enforcement to come and shoot at and do their training, the word spread across the region and everybody started going there. And before you know it, they were shooting up there 6 days a week, and the neighborhood kind of got fed up with all the noise, got contact with the mayor, and they shut it down. In regards to that, we had no other option but to do our full training over at the 130 Pearl Street basement that only has 5 lanes. Up in West Springfield, we're able to accommodate shooting 10 to 12 officers at one time on the line. Downstairs, we can only shoot five officers at one time because the lane is so small. And because of the amount of shooting that we do every single year that's required by the state, over the past 2 years, it's progressively gotten worse and worse and worse for the range deteriorating. We have materials coming back on us, metals coming back on us, parts of the ammunition coming back on us. Just the ventilation, we have to stop in between our shooting or our training segments to let it try and air out. And I've been told that when we open those doors to try to let it out, now all this stuff is going up through the entire building itself. We just got done shooting today, and pretty much everyone down there was pretty much coughing by the time we were heading down there today, shooting today. When the last administration was in, I sent all this up to Commissioner Barberi through the proper channels, through Deputy Daniel right here, and we tried to get the ball rolling and finding another solution. We looked at different outdoor ranges. Part of the problem is that there are a couple of outdoor ranges around here that may have facilitated what we needed. However, as soon as we told them how many rounds we shoot every single year, They said, absolutely not, we cannot accommodate that. We roughly shoot about 155,000 rounds a year. That is just for officer training itself, and probably another 130,000 rounds a year for recruit training. And that's literally putting potentially 4,000 to 6,000 pounds of lead into the ground every single year. And then they're the ones that have to clean that out. What they would have to charge us, or they just didn't want to bother with it. We did do some training up at the Granby range with our recruit training. It was good, and part of the problem with that was the weather. It was, some days it was extremely cold, extremely wet. And there's also the fact that I believe our contract doesn't allow us to train outside of Hampton County, and that's actually in another county as well. And I think that's where we're at right now with this.
Thank you. That's where we're at in terms of how we came to this solution, and then when the time comes, I'll let Officer Dumas talk about how this is more than just a firing range. There's 3 ranges. There's office space for the IIU, and then there's training space for the academy and or any other training the department needs.
And outside, possibly too. Outside intentions.
Thank you, both. Thank you for the report out. I don't know if you're Officer or Sergeant Dumas. We do understand that a police firing range is needed, so that's not really, you know, really why we're here or what the concern is, because we've been hearing that for a few years. And Counselor Allen and Counselor Edwards, I do see your hands raised, but I just have a few things that I want to start off with. The reason that I called the meeting together is because during the budget meeting, Counselor Letterman asked some questions regarding to the contract, and it came out that the contract was already done, and we didn't even know that we were going to have a cost of $800,000 a year until the budget discussions happened. And I think that that's where a lot of the concern lies, that this wasn't brought to our attention ahead of time. So I just wanted to lay the groundwork for that. And when I looked at the contract, it's already signed and it's effective April 1st. Is that right? 2020 is the effective date of the contract. Because I did get a signed copy from Theo that it is April 1st. So now we just got to talk about the funding of it, and also answer any questions that the counselors has. But one question that I keep having is the construction cost, and I got an estimate of about 17 million from who sent that, TJ?
I believe it was Lindsay through Pete Garvey. Pete Garvey.
And Pete Garvey got that estimate from where?
Pete, which one?
Oh, Pete's there. I didn't realize that. Oh, hi, Pete.
Which one are you referring to? Because there's, if we were going to do a standalone.
Nope, it was the estimate for the construction cost for the firing range at the old Smith & Wesson building. I can pull it up, but Lindsay did send it. She sent, and the estimate was around 17 million. So I also spoke to Tim Allen yesterday after you guys took the tour, and he said that he was told the estimated cost for construction was around 10 million. So I'm just trying to figure out where that gap is. And I'm also trying to figure out why we can't get a printout of the construction cost, because I had a small construction company, and I don't know if you guys know that, but before anyone would sign off on my contracts, they would want to see the cost. And so if construction is started, then the costs have been determined, and there is wiggle room for error, because you know, things can happen, and you can, you know, find other things that need to be taken care of. But there's some type of budget that is delivered. And if we are having a build out from the city, we wouldn't ask for construction costs ahead of time before we sign a contract with someone. So I'm just like confused as to why we can't get a document with the true construction cost. And then also when I looked into the signed contract that Theo sent, it looked like there was a estimated sheet in it, but it looked like the construction numbers were white out. So I don't even know what the problem is with getting, it was like Exhibit B or Exhibit A. It looks like it was a whiteout section.
Let me go back to the exhibits because I can explain those. The exhibits, the first exhibit was the architectural drawings. So that was Exhibit 1. Those are pretty clear on what we're getting. Exhibit B was contractors' scope of work that they were doing. So when the landlord, I wanted more detail on what we were getting for the scope. So that's what they provided me, was like the ceiling quote. We're going to be putting new ceilings in, you know, A, B, C, and D. He gave us quotes on the flooring, on the equipment. So we went through those to make sure we were getting everything we needed. Because the last thing we wanted to do at the end of this is to say, oh, you wanted a new floor? Well, you didn't tell us that. That's the backup we got. It wasn't, we didn't white anything out. It was the backup to provide to the contract. So we had a smooth lease agreement, so we knew exactly what we were getting. I do have that exhibit with me, and you know, Crestview parking lot. Those comments on there. If you see, please provide limits and stuff like that. Those were my comments, and then they wrote back to me and put them on the drawings to make sure we're getting. You know, there's not a lot of power outlets. Could you please put more power outlets? That was more of a scope of work than an actual estimate or quote given to us. It was never our intention to find out. We just did the same thing with the school department up at the conservatory, and we never knew any of the construction costs up there because it's, I don't want to say it's not our business, but it's not our, you know, they don't have to provide those costs to us. We could ask all day long, but
Yeah, they don't technically have to provide those costs, but I don't know why the city would sign a contract if we didn't know what the costs were. I don't know. That just seemed odd to me.
Well, we negotiated a scope of work with them of what we wanted them to do to the building on our behalf.
Yeah.
We negotiated a square footage cost that we could live with. And then we were involved in only the stuff that we know the cost for are the equipment and the HVAC system. And I can let Pete can go at a high level, explain kind of, you know, how the numbers come together. And the landlord may not give us exactly it, but I know we know at back of the envelope kind of what made sense to us.
well, I provided a new building. I can do the new building all day long. I can do a renovation all day long, but we're in a different world. We have prevailing wage that we need to pay, and we have different requirements for city and state projects. So they have a little bit more of a cost benefit to be able to do work at a little bit of I'm not going to say a discount, but lesser amount. Yeah. They're not paying prevailing wage.
Yeah, they don't have to pay prevailing wage. I do understand that.
Is it a lot of money? Absolutely, it's a lot of money, but it's a specialty building. Tim saw all the HVAC equipment is very specialized. The backstops are very specialized. And just to go back, we did a look at the existing police station in 2017, and we came up with you know, the wants of the police station, and they needed some a firing range in the order of about 13,000 square feet. What we're renting is about 15,000 square feet. So it fits into what the needs are for the Springfield Police Department.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions, but I'm going to yield the floor to the counselors. So Counselor Allen, followed by Counselor Edwards, followed by Counselor Letterman.
Thanks, Counselor Whitfield. Originally, when I raised my hand, it was to make sure that we got to hear from Mike Dumas, who did a lot of the leading of the tour yesterday, and it's his job to, as I'm not exactly sure what your title is, Mike, but I know he's the guy that knows the most about facilities like this and the different nuances and the different construction things we need and scenario things, etc. So I'm glad Mike already had a chance to talk. I will say, since I had my hand raised, I'll just add this to it, that I know there's issues with notification and all that. I'm not trying to pass by any of that. I know that's been something that has been a concern, but in terms of the options, I think it's the best option. And having seen it and see the quality and the functionality that's being created, I was pretty impressed with the whole thing. Is it worth the money? That's everybody has to answer that for themselves. But you can't. It's not 800,000 versus nothing. It's 800,000 versus some degree of hundreds of thousands. So to make it seem like 800,000 against nothing, I don't think is fair.
I don't know what that means. Can you explain 800,000 against nothing? Because I don't think anyone has said that, and I don't understand what that means.
Well, I mean that if you accept the fact that something has to be done to improve Pearl Street, then there's going to be some money involved. And that's going to cost any one of those four scenarios, build our own, do what we're doing, build our own, go to the gun clubs, or stay where we are. Each has, pluses and minuses. Staying where we are has a lot of minuses. So I think we're faced with having to do something. And based on what I saw yesterday, I was pretty impressed with the functionality and the fact that I think somebody said it's going to be the possibly the best facility of this type in the Northeast, and will be a desirable place for people to rent, etc. So I just wanted to plug that what we saw on the tour, and I'd love to hear what Victor had to say, but what we saw on the tour was pretty impressive. And Mike, if you guys have questions about the functionality of this option versus any of the other options, I'm sure Mike would be the guy to answer a lot of that, or Pete Garvey. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Councilor Edwards?
Yes, I'm not that concerned with the quality of the construction and what this facilities, the bells and whistles and things of that. I'm sure that the administration would not create something that was second class. So first, let me get that out the way. My concerns are related to things like and I need, maybe somebody can explain to me the difference between 30B versus 149.
Yep. Peter, you still on, buddy? Theo, you want to take that question?
You're muted, Theo.
Unmute yourself.
Okay. Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I do.
Councilor Edwards, how are you, sir?
Good.
So I think one of the most important things with one of the questions that Councilor Whitfield was asking is, let's look at the construction costs, which might be pertinent to what you're asking. Is it's important to realize that this is a lease. This is not a construction contract disguised as a lease. We are not directly financing the construction and the build out of what the landlord's doing. We as a tenant came up with a list of things that we needed to see based on the police department's needs. And there's going to be a build out of this property by the landlord for our use during the life of the lease. We are not financing construction. That would be one difference. This is a 30B unique property lease, so it's actually even more distinctive against than a regular 30B. So with the unique property, the city makes a unique property disclosure, which is what they file with the Central Register of the state of Massachusetts for 30 days before the lease begins, that says all of the things that make this property unique to the inventory of the city of Springfield. And I don't think anyone would argue that it's not unique. It was a half-constructed shooting range to begin with that was just derelict and not being used. So that's why that there was no RFP process. It's kind of similar to, TJ mentioned it earlier, SCOTA, the Conservatory of the Arts. It was basically something that was used as a school in the past, that became available to the city to lease. So now we are a tenant there, and the landlord also did an extensive build out. And again, in that particular lease, we are not financing the cost of construction there either. So those are the main differences. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I would like to know how this relates to, or how this would be compared to the situation from 2009 with the lawsuit over the Thomas J. O'Connor Center. And does this, there's several things you mentioned about prevailing wage. Was this a way of subverting prevailing wage? And if, as the chairman of the REO committee for over a decade, we have consistently encouraged the paying of prevailing wage because the workforce is local, whether they're entirely of Springfield or not. Was this a way to subvert that as well? Does this set us up for a parallel or another type of lawsuit similar to the one that we lost related to the construction of Thomas J. O'Connor? Because as you say, this is not a building that we are building. We're not paying for the building, but the specs were specific to what we wanted, and they're building it specifically to our specifications. So would that not create a different kind of lane? The optics of it, I mean, I'm not an attorney, and to be frank and honest with you, I don't have access, to an attorney that works for me, that I pay, whose loyalty is to me. And this is something I have brought up many years ago around the biomass plant in an exchange with Ed, which is that the city council, our attorneys don't work for the city council, they work for the administration. So I don't have an attorney that I can reach out to and ask these types of questions, so I'm going to do it in this arena here. But can you address that? Does this open us up to another lawsuit similar to the TJL?
No, the case that you're referring to is actually called the Andrews case.
Yes, Mark Andrews.
Yep.
I have a copy of it right in front of me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I have a copy of it right in front of me.
Okay, so it's something that we look at, I look at very carefully whenever we do enter into one of these leases. There's a multi-pronged test that was established by the Andrews case, and I couldn't recite them off the top of my head. There's 5 or 6 different prongs of the test that checks off whether or not this is a circumventing of 149 or if this is a true lease. I know one of them is how much you're changing the character of the building. In that particular case, we're not doing that too much here because there's already an existing shooting range. Number 2 would be ownership. This is not a 100-year lease or something like that. We don't have an option at the end of the lease to buy the building for $1, which I think was actually in the Andrews case. Different prongs would go over aspects of control exercised by the city. In Andrews, you had the equivalent of Peter Garvey and the equivalent of a city paid for and contracted for architect attending weekly project meetings and checking off every single possible detail. They pretty much gave the landlord specifications and said, this is what you will do. And in this particular case, none of those things happened here. We gave a basic idea. I think one of the only real major decisions we made was what kind of equipment that the police department was going to be using for the ballistic side, the shooting range side. But other than that, this is very much a landlord-controlled build-out with limited control from the city, other than a very general overview of what we wanted. What Peter was talking about earlier was we're making sure we're getting what we're paying for as far as warranties for different kinds of, for again, the equipment, specific square footages for what offices and things of that nature. It's not the kind of control that was in the Andrews case that opened up to a lawsuit. Again, I would compare this to the Skoda, because that was another one that we looked at very carefully and made sure it was an arm's length transaction for a unique property lease and not circumventing construction.
Okay. I've heard from people in the union trade already about the fact that this is public money, city money. So it's not federal money. So it doesn't, unlike Union Station when we contributed to that and had no oversight over that construction. Why, under these circumstances, when this project is essentially being funded by us, would the REO not have had a a say in monitoring the hiring of residents, women, minorities? Why would they not been had any knowledge of this until it came out on the agenda a week ago, Thursday, I believe?
So again, I want to be very clear. We're not financing construction. It is a lease. We are paying them an amount for usage of a certain piece of property that's going to be built out. It's not a city building that we will own. We didn't have a designer that we went and hired. There was no bidding process because it was procured through 30B of the unique property determination. We're not financing the construction. We're paying a set fee to occupy and use the building. Therefore, it's not 149. I know that we had some issues with the union as for the Chestnut Towers case as well, where I had to go to Boston and argue for that one as well. And this is very similar. Well, different that we're a lender in that case and we're going to be a tenant in this case. But all the check marks are there is that we don't own the property, we didn't own the property, and we have a very limited amount of oversight and control to the build out. That's what makes it different.
Okay, I'm gonna allow for my other colleagues to speak on it, but I just want to end with the final thing of why would it have not made good sense for us to use the leverage of a need of acknowledgement from the state and that we need a new police station. And I know that if this requires that these officers shoot twice a year for certification, why wouldn't we use the fact that we don't have those facilities? We already have money or proposed money coming at some point in the future. Why wouldn't we use the fact that we need to have these certifications as a reason why they should move faster with trying to get us a new station, and use the fact that we're going to spend approximately $16 million over the next 20 years on something that should have been designed into that new station?
So I'll take that question first, and I'll defer to Pat Sullivan, who's in the back of the room. So two things. One is we had a $45 million earmark and a bond bill to replace the police station. Police station is going to cost $100 million at this point, roughly, and Pete can correct me if I'm wrong. We don't have the bond capacity to do $45 million worth of, or $50 million worth of, we won't have the bond capacity for a number of years because of all the schools we're building to be able to contribute our $45 to $55 million for that project. Having said that, Pat Sullivan has been clear since 2007, Pat, you want to come up, is police departments are getting away with putting firing ranges in the same building in which their headquarters are. And I don't know, Pat, if you want to talk about.
Sure. Good evening, counselors. I would say Pearl Street and Harena are the two buildings that keep me up at night. And we work very hard to keep both buildings safe for all the occupants. In 2007, we conducted a study to renovate the police department. And from that study, we have done upgrades to the electrical systems and the HVAC system to the best of our ability. In this report, though, at no time was it ever going to be kept to keep the firing range in that building. There's no amount of equipment to ensure the safety of the occupants in that building to keep that as an active firing range. As a yearly exercise, and the last one was May of 2019. In April, we did an air quality test. I had a separate company review those, and that was ATC. And in that report, airborne mold tests were acceptable on 4/1/19, except the basement. And then it goes on to state, staff reported clean lead bullets and filters and shooting range local ventilation system. ATC recommends a safe work procedure to be followed during these operations as necessary to comply with OSHA lead regulation 1910 CFR 1025. That is basically impossible to have happen, as Officer Dumas stated. They did firing today in the building. They all left coughing. And what's happened with these air tests, we are getting that lead through the building, not at a hazardous level, but it is happening. When I got this last report, I went to the administration and I informed the administration that I can no longer, in good conscience, be signing off on that fire range and that there needs to be a solution. And going to Councilor Edwards' statement, the mayor said, oh yeah, we've got 50 million from the state. And I informed the administration, I said, that's all well and good. The clock is ticking. We have no more time. We have to make a decision. We have to pull that firing range out of this building. And I believe that's what's, these reports is what started the process of looking for alternatives, because it's clear, and especially now with COVID, we are not going to get 50 million out of the Commonwealth of Mass anytime soon because of just all the debt that's going on due to COVID. So I'm very thankful that this has moved forward because I would probably, if this wasn't happening, I'd be shutting it down as I did Chestnut Middle School back in 2006 when I found the conditions in that building. That's my responsibility and my role in the ordinance that I work under. I have to shut a building down if it's unsafe. And that's where we were headed if we kept the use of this fire range.
Thank you, Pat. I'm done.
Councilor Letterman, followed by Councilor Gomez.
Thanks very much, Councilor Whitfield, and thanks everybody for being on the call today. I'm glad we're getting a chance to really dig into the details of this particular deal, and I think this is something that probably should have predated the budget process, but I'm glad we're getting a chance to do this now. Let me start by saying I don't think that anybody believes that we don't need to move the training facility out of the basement from Pearl Street. That's been made abundantly clear, and there's no member of the city council that doesn't want our police officers who serve the city of Springfield to have the best training possible, to be in a healthy environment, to receive that training. And so we certainly have to do something. So let me start by saying that. Also, I would have been glad to have attended the tour of the facility. I know only 2 councilors were able to attend. Unfortunately, we received a notification of that tour at 2 o'clock on Monday for a Wednesday morning tour. And for many of us, it's just not possible to move our schedules with our day jobs. Most of us do work full-time in addition to working full-time in our role as counselors to support our family. So in the future, if we're booking visits like that, it would be great to work through the administrative staff in our office to find a time when the most counselors possible can attend. So the first question that I have, and I asked some of this during the budget hearing, but I'd like to get back to it because I've done some research, and I think that the thing that came as a surprise to most counselors during the budget hearing was when we sort of arrived at the conclusion that a contract had actually already been signed and executed, and we had gone into whether or not a contract of that nature needed approval by the city council. And so you know, as we stand here right now with a signed and executed contract, I'm just wondering what the opinion of the administration is on whether or not that contract needed approval by the city council.
So I'll start out and I'll defer to Theo on the legal piece of it. So first of all, I do want to apologize for the lack of communication as it relates to it was getting in the budget. The budget came up fast. Normally that's not how I do business. I send memos like I always do on things that I think are important in nature. Having said that, so I do apologize for that piece of it. The reason the city council is not involved on the approving a contract over 3 years as it is the 30B contract and other contracts is because of the unique property designation part of the law. So we do not have to come before the city council to ask for permission to do an extended lease. We didn't do it for the performing arts school. We didn't do it for the health department. You know, but Theo, I don't know if you want to go into that, the legal aspect of that, why that piece is important.
So Massachusetts Chapter 30B is for supplies and services, and it says that any contract over 3 years needs approval by the legislative body, which is the city council. 30B has a specific carve out for real property disposition and acquisition, which is that section 16. And within that section 16 is how you get a unique property determination. And for lack of a better terminology, that requirement's just not there for the leases of real property disposition or acquisition, including unique properties. So like TJ said, we didn't get it for the SCOTA lease. We didn't get it for the either one of the HHS offices. It's not a requirement legally.
So you're absolutely right that the three-year contract over 3-year approval doesn't apply, and it doesn't not apply because of the unique property aspect. It doesn't apply because it's not a good or a service. So I've looked into that, and you're correct. But my question would be, and maybe Theo might be the best place to answer this, but just in exploring this, and I did spend some time on the phone with the Inspector General's office as well as just some other folks. And I was pointed in the direction of Chapter 40, Section 13 of Mass General Law that states, no land, easement, or right therein shall be taken or purchased under this section unless the taking or purchase thereof previously has been authorized by the City Council or by vote of the town, nor until an appropriation of money to be raised by loan or otherwise has been made by the purpose, for the purpose by a 2/3 vote of the City Council. And so, Theo, do you think anywhere that Chapter 40, Section 13, which does deal with real property, does that apply either in this situation or in any other situation? Because you're correct that it didn't, the HHS offices didn't come before the City Council. The Conservatory the Arts didn't come before the City Council. So I don't know if that's because the administration has an interpretation that Chapter 40, Section 13 doesn't apply. But I'm just wondering if what your thoughts are on that.
So in this particular circumstance, we're not taking or purchasing, we're renting as a tenant. We have no ownership right outside of this lease. I think if we were going to take the property through eminent domain, then you'd be able to use a Chapter 40 to get legislative approval. But we're not doing that here. We will not own the property afterwards. We don't have the ability to buy it for any kind of nominal fee. We're not creating any kind of ownership right, which is what I think Chapter 40 deals with.
So you don't think that a right therein being taken or purchased refers to a lease?
No, because we are not taking or purchasing. We are renting.
But if you take, so I'm going to ask the city solicitor for an interpretation on Chapter 40, Section 13. I did email the solicitor the day after the budget meeting. I haven't received a response yet from that email last month, but I do want to get clear on that, not just for this property, but really for any step taken, because I think the purpose of laws of this nature is really just to ensure that there's as much fiscal oversight and legislative scrutiny as possible. And I think when you're dealing with deals as large as this, that are for as long as this and involve this much money, I think that legislative oversight is especially appropriate. And again, I want to be clear that we all agree we have to make a move out of Pearl Street. So this isn't about blocking this particular move, but I think we as a city need to be very clear on these sorts of fiscal things, because long after we're all gone, there will be others here dealing with the fiscal nature of the city, and we're going to want to make sure that we have good precedents in place. So a couple other questions that I had was just relative to the lease itself. So within the lease that we got a copy of the day after the budget hearing, it does look like there is a section that specifically refers to the lease being subject to appropriation. And so essentially it says that the administration will do its best to secure appropriation for the lease, but should appropriation not be secured, the lease terminates. Because of the way that the budget is presented and ultimately approved, what is your current interpretation, TJ, of the administration's status in terms of securing appropriation to fund the contract?
So that's a great question. So the council cut $800,000 out of the budget at the OTPS level. The council cannot charge the cut. The council can just make the cut, and the department head and the administration implement the cut. So in this case, we reduced the $800,000 to $400,000. By the time we get in there, the first bill is due. Won't be due till the end of December, assuming they're done on November 1st as it's decided. So that's $400,000 savings there. And then we reduced Pat Sullivan's facilities budget by the tune of $400,000 by working together, paring back his budget so it has minimal impact on his operations.
So you're saying you're still gonna fund, your intent is still to fund, it can be prorated at $400,000 for this year.
Correct. And then then next year it'll be the full annual amount. And then, we'll work with Pat Sullivan on his budget to minimize the impact for the facilities operation.
So you feel that our total liability to them this fiscal year, will only be $400,000?
Correct. Well, once I clarified the contract terms with the CFO of the company, we're in agreement that the first payment, if they open on November 1st, which is our fingers crossed, we have to pay that they pay invoice us for November 30th, and we have 30 days to pay until the end of December. So
prior to your clarifying of those contract terms, it was an $800,000 item in the budget. So what, if we only were going to have a liability of $400,000, what was the other $400,000 going to go towards?
it was an over appropriation on our part for funding the full year lease when we only fund half the year lease.
So the lease is for 20 years. What happens at the end of the 20 years?
We walk away, or we re-up, or figure it out. Hopefully I'm not here for that.
And then lastly, when we were holding the budget hearings, people were using the term Smith & Wesson pretty regularly throughout to refer to this property. But can we just clarify for the record, the property is not owned by Smith & Wesson. It's owned by who?
It's owned by, well, it's 299 Page LLC, and it's owned by the owners of North Star Pulp and Paper.
Who are they?
The Goodman family.
And when did they acquire it?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea where they acquired it. So,
and do you know? Yeah, I'm just trying to understand. I just want to understand when it changed hands. That's my only question.
Well, I have no idea when it changed hands. So the kind of process that happened, just so the council understands, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So the police department was looking at all these options all along, getting a standalone building estimate, trying to figure out what we could do to get out of the building. At that point, I wasn't involved. I knew Jen Lyden and the commissioner and the deputy chief and Officer Dumas were looking at things. They knew they needed options. When it became when they actually showed up to walk through the former Smith & Wesson 299 Page, the mayor asked me to go up and kind of check in and see, what's going on, see what the property looks like, is it a viable option, and knowing all the stuff that Pat Sullivan has said, all the stuff that Pete said, all that stuff. So that's when I actually got involved, and I went up to the building, checked it out, and the sheer excitement, I guess, for lack of a better word, of what that thing could be, just became a situation where we're like, okay. Then after that piece where I saw it, I'm like, this actually could work. And in my mind, if you read the Central Register, the unique property designation that we posted for 30 days, I only wanted to pay $450,000 because I just thought back in the envelope, that was where my head was at for this. When the architects actually walked through and Pete Garvey actually walked through, we saw the HVAC system needed to be completely replaced. They needed to shore up the steel, to hold whatever the technical terms are for where the bullets get shot at, and I'll leave that to them. The prices started to grow. So I originally wanted to do a revenue sharing, pay like $400,000 or $500,000 and do a revenue sharing agreement with the owners and split the revenue from the police departments that might want to come. They didn't want that. They said, look, I'm in it for however much they're going to be in it for. This is where we're at. This is the square footage we want. This is where we're going to be at. And it got up to just under $700,000. And then the added for the $700,000 is the other triple net lease aspects of that. So that's how it got to $800,000. So then in my mind, I'm saving $100,000 by moving IIU out of Maple Street and then avoiding $100,000 cost for rent at another building into a secure facility that people can feel comfortable coming to report a complaint against a police officer. And interrupt me if I'm going astray. Then we're saving about $40,000 to $50,000 in ammunition because we no longer have to buy special ammunition that they shoot down in the basement of Pearl Street. So it's $150,000 there. And we get to generate revenue by renting it out or whatever we decide as the avenue to other police departments to come and shoot and train. And then the commissioner has a vision of having it open to the public for certifications and proper training and firearm handling through the Officer Dumas's crew there. So all those came together, and in my mind, I was like, okay, if this all comes together, yes, 800,000 sticker shock sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. I'm not belittling that, but the net effect in my mind is going to be $400,000 to $500,000 once everything's said and done. So that's why, in my mind, it became a solid business decision. We're not adding to our debt. We're not taking 3 to 5 years to build our own building. We're getting out of there in 6 months because I know people don't necessarily like the fact that it's private development and they don't pay prevailing wage, but they can move quickly. And so they were able to move real fast, and we're moving quickly on that. So in my mind, the way and in my professional opinion, as I put in the letter that I sent, this makes the best sense, the most expeditious sense, and most logical sense for us. And that's kind of really how I approach it with the cost-benefit analysis.
Okay. Very last question, Madam Chair. I know you've been very generous, and I apologize. Why 20 years? How do we arrive at a 20-year term?
But that was just kind of a negotiation with the landlord to get us to a point where he was comfortable and they were comfortable with investing that amount of money that they were investing into it, and then it was comfortable for us, because typically a building would be 20 years for us. If we built a building, we would bond for 20 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Letterman. Councilor Gomez, you had your hand up, but I think it's down now. But did you still want to speak?
No reason to ask any questions. It was just more on the economic development standpoint that Mr. Plant just spoke to. So I don't want to be redundant, and just be careful with time and just let everybody else. It was just more just wondering how much money we were going to get from renting it out and stuff like that, which he spoke to. So, which I'm satisfied for. More or less, my idea is just figuring out if we are going to make money eventually down the line, how much money was it going to be, and how does that offset that 800? So necessarily, we're not only kicking up the 800,000, but it turns into where we might be kicking up only 400 because we're making something down the line. And the opening up the public and certifying the public through those things is very, very interesting. I like that. With that being said, that's all it was. It was just, he spoke to it already, so it's fine. And then he just spoke to the contract, the longevity of it, because we have talked about wondering, down the line, maybe not now or in the next 4 or 5 years, that $50 million is going to come from the state for our new police department. But essentially down the line, within 20 years or before that, if we wanted to talk about building a new police station, can that be in the plan? So essentially, we're not necessarily, only in 2 locations and kicking up 800,000, and we could save the money dramatically 10 years down the line. So I guess that's something for hopefully when we're not all here talking about it 10 years from now or 20 years from now. It's just a building. In my vision, I would love to have seen that part of the project, part of the plan when we build our new police station, but that was it.
And
that's fine.
Chair, if you indulge me, I would like the deputy and Officer Dumas to just comment on how we think the state-of-the-art facility is going to be when it comes to being desirable for other departments to come. And, I don't know, Mike.
Yeah, I would like to hear that, because that's I think the main impact, and the reason why I was a little critical about it is because I want to make sure that we can capitalize as much as possible with the interest of I see a lot of layers. 1, public safety. 2, economic development, and a chance for us to make I think a ton of money, where a place that Springfield doesn't have one of these facilities, and knowingly that there's a lot of uptick of people talking about that they want to be certified, they want to be able to utilize a facility where they feel safe at, and I think that's something that I think would be more receptible to people that want to exercise their Second Amendment right. That's all. If I'm getting the amendment right, I apologize. I'm not a gun owner. I wouldn't know.
Mike, you want to just kind of...
Okay, so several years ago, a few years back, I know there was some plans going around for the possible new police station, and they had plans of putting a range inside the basement of the police station, which now me doing my research, and I think TJ said it too, a lot of departments that sold the deputy are getting away from having the shooting ranges inside the police department, because no matter how much you try to separate the ventilation, at some point, because the way new buildings are built, and Peter, you can correct if I'm wrong, they work on negative pressure, and what happens is it sucks all that stuff out of the vents, and then they get intermingled with each other at some point. So that's one of the reasons why that we would rather have that outside of the police station. In regards to the generating revenue, I'm gonna be frank, I don't think it's a $1 million project every year, but there is some revenue to be made, whether on renting out to other departments. At this point right now, I couldn't tell you what to even charge them. I'm not really a numbers guy. Yeah, we'll work to that. in regards to doing maybe certifications for folks that want to come in and maybe get their LTC or license to carry. I think the commissioner had mentioned that. That's a very good idea, I think. In regards to recycling what we use there as in regards to the lead content in the brass, that could be something that could actually be to help to sustain the normal operation of the facility itself.
Yeah, so there's going to be salvage value of the lead and the brass that we own the rights to, so we can get additional revenue that way. So that answer the question, Counselor, I hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We're good.
TJ, can you just send me a quick email about all the revenue generation ideas that you have? I don't know if you sent it already.
Well, I sent the memo. I didn't put numbers to it yet because I still got to work with Jen Lyde and the commissioner on kind of how to price out what that would look like for a department to come in. I'm sure it's going to be frequency, the number of days, and all that stuff. But I did send a memo today explaining some of the cost reductions and or cost avoidance. But I could get you something a little more detailed than what we're thinking.
Alrighty, thank you. And Councilor Davila, followed by Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everybody, for the great conversation. Just want to say yesterday there was a fantastic tour. Very, as I mentioned before, impressive building. And Officer Dumas, you did a great job yesterday. I do think, before we go on, that now that we saw the new facility, I'm requesting that we also make a tour of the current facility on Pearl Street. I think it's important also that we see the current firing range. I have never seen it. I'm sure many of my colleagues have never seen it as well. So I would like to, myself and any other councilors that would like to join us to take a tour of the current shooting range at Pearl Street. I'm sure that's possible, right, Officer Dumas?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can do that. We can set that on, but we'll do it in the council office.
Very well, so that we can compare oranges to oranges, and maybe next week we can make that happen. I just want to, Madam Chair, I'm going to be as brief as possible. A lot of my questions have been sort of answered. I just want to make a slight observation from something TJ said. I understand what he's saying about moving quickly, but I'm not sure that if paying prevailing wage would have delayed the project. Just my observation. And so at the end of 20 years, we have options, several options. We don't know, apparently from what I just heard now, we don't know what those options are going to be. And obviously, as Theo and everybody has stated, this is a project that's unique. And it's a project that is absolutely needed. And as it was mentioned, we all agree to it. In fact, I want this to make this happen, but as I said before, we have to be financially prudent with the money, particularly with the uncertain times that we may be facing down the road due to the coronavirus, where we might be impacted 15 up to 25% in state aid, if I'm correct. But with that being said, my specific point and question is, why, if we know that this is needed, why didn't we just take the property by eminent domain?
Because the process of by eminent domain, we would have to have had to have acquired it through eminent domain for the appraised value of whatever the values of that building was. And we didn't do the appraised value, so I don't know what did that. But then once we owned it, we would have to invest $20 million of our money into renovating it through prevailing wage and everything else. I mean,
if we had 149, we'd have to do 149.
We do it through public procurement, it would cost us a lot of time.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just trying to follow the logic here, guys. So if I'm not mistaken, North Star, who owns the property now, they paid about $700,000 for the property maybe last year. So I don't know how much of a burden would have been for the city. And $20 million, according to what you're saying, TJ, it's not that much from the 16 we're going to be paying in 20 years. I'm just trying to, I hear what you're saying, but I feel.
No, I know what you're saying too, Councilor. It wasn't so we don't have bond capacity to do a building, a $20 million building, because we're doing all the schools right now that are straining our capacity for the next 2 years. We did it ourselves. It was 3 to 5 years in order to do it through eminent domain and through public construction. So the expeditious way was to enter into a long-term lease and let the owner build it out for us in 6 months and let us get in there and do it that way.
Right.
We looked at all those.
Now, all right. Now, how we and I know that you guys negotiated 20 years, but I will encourage you, in my humble opinion, that maybe we can sit back, because I'm sure North Star wants to have this building used. I'm sure they want the revenue. I understand that, and we want the building. I would just highly encourage you guys to maybe negotiate a shorter lease. You know, I don't know. Maybe to make it more plausible, but that's just my suggestion. And so I'm sure, I know this is needed. I want to see the current arrangements, and you know, I see it's, you know, we all know that this is needed. We all know also that we need to watch our pennies. So with that, I end. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Davila. Councilor Edwards?
All right, I just got one more real quick question related to the fact that, is it not true, or is it factual that when recently, I believe, that when we've had to go into, we have had the city council had to authorize the city and the administration to enter into leases beyond 3 years? And I'm specifically thinking back to around the computer software, which we don't really we don't own at the end of the lease, similar to this building. But when is not factual that in the past you guys had to, before you even signed the contract, to utilize software in our IT department, that you had to come to the council and ask for our permission to enter into the contract, and then we would approve your ability to sign the contract? And why would that be different than this situation where we're entering into a contract that we didn't even know about until last week, but it was signed months ago? And at the end of this lease, once again, similar to that software, we won't own the building.
So the short answer is there are two different aspects of the procurement law that are there. The software, 5-year agreement for the software was under 30B service part, and I will defer to Theo to further clarify that question.
Correct. So this is for a property, so it's any kind of disposition or acquisition of property, including unique properties and leases, fall under that specific carve out that do not require legislative approval. So that would be different than any contract where we wanted to purchase a widget or a service that would be over 3 years. We would need legislative approval for that.
So the software is not the same because it's not a building, but it's still a product. It's something that the city's IT department has to take control of. Actually, it has to upload into their system, and they still don't really own it. We're only leasing it. So maybe, and so the only difference is that because we went through this through 30B versus 149.
No, the difference is what it is. It's a piece of, it's real property. It's not a thing, and it's not a service. It's an acquisition, lease, or disposition of a piece of property, which is in the carve out of section 16 of 30B. Every other 30B contract would require legislative approval if over 3 years.
Yeah, I believe we've done that with the fire trucks that we don't really own. We lease them, correct? Some of the large or more expensive equipment.
So we will own those at the end. The ones that I've done recently, at least.
Yeah, they're leased to own. Fire trucks are leased to own.
Okay, but I know the software is, am I accurate on the software, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that was a great discussion, and we got more understanding of the process. I just hope in the future that we can avoid even going through this and just having someone in the council, you know, in the process up front. Councilor Letterman has his hand up, and that's going to be our last question because I actually have to get off and do something else. So Councilor Letterman will finalize it with you. And I also do want to wait for your public opinion. So hopefully, I mean, you know what it's called, that you're going to send to Ed.
Madam Chairwoman, I am always glad to give you my public opinion anytime. Certainly, yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Madam Chair, and I apologize if this was addressed. I did have to step away for about 5 minutes, and I'm back. I just wanted to understand. I agree it was a very positive discussion. We have a couple more questions that looks like to get answered, but what is TJ, the administration's intent at this time? Is the intent simply to try to make the $400,000 work within the facilities maintenance budget now, or is the intent to bring a supplemental budget to try to raise the funds again?
So the intent as of right now is just to absorb the impact of the cut, as the council did a few weeks ago. But I'm going to be monitoring with Pat to make sure that he can still deliver on his main core service in the facilities department, and then just keep an eye on it. So Pat and I are going to work closely together to really analyze the impact of the other 400,000.
Okay.
So none of the, just to be clear, to follow up on that question, none of Pat's services or none of his staff will be cut as a result to paying this lease.
So
We're balancing everything.
yeah, we're working together to balance it to minimize any impact. So I mean, that part,
No layoffs.
there'll be definitely no layoffs as it relates to this. And I just got to kind of figure out what projects may or may not get done because of it, and figure out, so I'll just make sure you know with Pat on what comes up.
And I'm thrilled to be doing this.
Can we get a list of those projects when you guys determine what they are?
Yeah, we can get you a list. Pat and John Carrington are working on a lot of projects in the hopper that are going to get done, and then there might be a few that may or may not.
Right now, I'm trying to get schools up. I need about 2 weeks to figure out.
Did you hear? He needs 2 weeks just because they're trying to get schools ready.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, Councilor Gomez. Councilor Hurst has not spoken, and so I do want to hear from him. And if your question after him is going to be very brief, like right to the point, then we'll go ahead and have you after him. But literally, we have like 4 minutes.
Councilor Whitfield, I just wanted you to feel how I normally feel when I'm looking to get to close a meeting out. Quick question, TJ. Why do I feel like we're giving this particular company a TIF without necessarily giving them officially a TIF and negotiating some of the things that we might want? Maybe it is customary, but it seems to me that based off of the large amount in which it appears that we are paying them from a lease standpoint, why in the world are they not paying taxes for 20 years?
That was
Did I read that?
That was a robust conversation that we had with the landlord. It's one of those that it's a triple net lease that it was kind of a deal breaker for that. We pay taxes to ourselves for a few other properties. So it was one of those that, we negotiated hard on that. It's just the way the contract came out.
So taxes are going up, water and sewer rates are going up, and we as the city of Springfield are gonna pay for somebody else's taxes and water and sewer when we're paying them a significant amount of money. I do have a tremendous problem with that, and we certainly, I don't know what you negotiated, but you certainly, I didn't hear anything about local workers. I didn't hear anything about hiring minorities. Maybe that's somewhere, and if so, or women and veterans. If so, then I'd love to hear it. I certainly know that our union workers are being left out, which is also a problem. So if you can get that information to me in terms of what it is that they have been committed to doing in terms of hiring locally, that would be greatly appreciated.
I only ask the question, and it does bother me too when I see ourselves paying ourselves taxes. Unfortunately, sometimes it's just the cost of doing business to get a transaction done. But I agree with you. I don't typically like to do it, but in this instance, I'd much rather have our officers in a new facility, but upgraded facility in a timely manner. But I do agree with you.
So you've heard my concerns on that point, and then the second thing that I just want to make clear.
We'll ask if they got data on that stuff that you just asked for a second.
That would be great. I think at the very least that ought to have been negotiated if it hasn't done so already. I also think that, you know, that if we can negotiate a lease that is not as long, that probably makes sense as well. But, you know, I neither here nor there. My second question is, did I hear you say that the construction has not been accounted for in the dollar amount of the lease? Is that, I mean, is the reason why the lease is so significant from a number standpoint because they are accounting for what it is that they're putting into the property? I mean, is that accurate?
Yes, and I really indulge Pete on this because Pete actually, the way we talked about it, I mean, the equipment alone, they're in it for $7 million. You know, and then you had $1 million for site work, you had $4 million to tear down the back of the building for make parking for the officers. You add in a few other, you know, the build out for the training space that they did. I mean, I don't know if you can clarify.
Tracy, that 17 million that you're referring to is actually 21 million. I know what you're talking about now. You had me a little bit confused. We sent that out to an estimator that we use regularly to estimate what it would cost us to build or rehab the building. And it was roughly 21 million.
So my only point is that we are indeed paying for the construction. It's just incorporated into the lease. Now, how much we're paying for, it sounds like nobody knows, but it seems to me that the taxpayers ought to know what it is that folks are paying for and what that looks like. And if you guys don't know, you know, from my standpoint, that's kind of shame on you, right? Because it's incorporated into the lease. And so I would like to see that parsed out a little bit more in terms of what construction costs over the course of 20 years we are indeed incurring and what that looks like. Because I know that those who own the building know, and I know that they've accounted for it in your lease. And so it would seem to me that you all ought to know too. So to the extent you can get that information and parse it out, it'd be greatly appreciated. That has not been clear. That has not been made clear to me on this phone call. So with that being said, Councilor Whitfield, I'll stop there. And it's always good to be on the other end. I like this much better. I don't have to show my face either.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you reiterating that because that has been my my issue with this whole contract is not knowing the construction cost. I can't get my head wrapped around it, but I did not think about the TIF aspect of it and paying the water and sewer, which seems like a lot. But I'll defer my comments because Council President Hurst already asked for that information. So Councilor Gomez, as quickly as possible, please.
No, it's more of a statement. It's not even a question. I just wanted to be clear that the cut that was made by the city council did not come out of the police budget. So I have to really stand firm. And if I didn't say anything, because the dispel in the communications that are coming towards some of our colleagues on the city council and also to myself is that there's some rumor or of odd proportion saying that the city council is trying to defund the police. Essentially, we have a fiscal responsibility and a duty. And whoever is having that conversation, I would love just to put that on the record that this project did not come from the police budget, that this project was, when it got to us, was already had issues to it. We explained our issues at this meeting. We're asking for a lot more information, but moving forward that we support our police training and we support our officers 110%. And because we want to hold people accountable when the time is right, we shouldn't have to feel that when we want to communicate with individuals that are on the other side of the table, that we can't collectively come together like this and really get to the nitty gritty of things. So with that being said, I just want to make sure that this project and us questioning it wasn't a move on the city council to defund the police because it did not come out of the police budget. And I just want to make that clear because talking to some officers, they're under the impression that these moves and these cuts that we made was an opportunity for us to move into a direction of that kind of conversation, which wasn't part of the conversation. But with that being said, thank you, Madam President. You held a great meeting. I'm in full support of whatever it is that the council needs to do at this part. But TJ, officers, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Gomez, for saying that. I just want to, I'm sorry, TJ?
I'm just saying crystal clear on the fact that knowing that the dialogue's not defunding the police, it never has been from our perspective, so.
Okay.
Well, so I just want to be crystal clear that's not coming from.
No, maybe it's not directly you, sir, but it's just, it's the conversation.
You guys understand.
Yeah, it's probably just a perception. And I also want to make it known that our, the perception should be is we have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens and the taxpayers of the city of Springfield to question how their money is being spent. And since this did not come from a grant or any federal funding or any state grant, that it is our responsibility to get to the nitty-gritties of why this happened and why it wasn't discussed, and if things that are taking place are being done legally. And that's to Councilor Letterman's point, making sure that we are not open to lawsuits, because that again would be taxpayers' money, and we've done enough of those. So thank you everybody for joining the meeting today, and we are going to adjourn.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it.